Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen said Monday the Trump administration is simply enforcing the law when it comes to its policy of family separation. Nielsen also said President Trump was trying to fix a, quote, broken system and called on Democrats to work with the White House to find a solution. A growing number of lawmakers are condemning the administration's policy, with at least 2 senators calling for Secretary Nielsen to resign. Secretary Nielsen's doubling down on the policy comes as a new CBS News poll shows 67% of Americans say separating parents and children at the border is unacceptable. In that same poll, 62% of Americans said they disapproved of the way President Trump is handling the issue of immigration. For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. He's in Washington. So, Ed, Secretary Nielsen reiterated what administration officials have been saying, that the policy was not created by the Trump administration and that it's a product of loopholes. Is she right?
Not entirely, Elaine. Look, this is a law that was established decades ago, and what the administration is opting to do is to fully enforce it. They have discretion here. They could opt to find a way to keep these families together, and they are deciding not to do that, saying that they are simply enforcing law as written, and that if Congress wants to fix it, by all means go ahead and act and do so. They know exactly what they're doing. They've sort of executed what some have called the nuclear option, and know that this was going to be a politically charged moment, an emotional one, and one that was going to lead to this kind of criticism. But remember, this is a campaign pledge that the president kept to enforce immigration laws as written and express a desire to work with Congress to fix them. And so at this point, essentially, the White House continues to say, if you got a problem with this, go ahead and fix it.
Well, Secretary Nielsen also echoed calls for Congress, to work with the White House to end the policy. So is the White House essentially using this as a bargaining chip?
Well, I think some are certainly going to charge that is the case. Nielsen batted away questions about that at the daily briefing, saying, no, we're just enforcing the law. And again, reiterated, if Congress wants to fix it, go ahead. But certainly, I think if you look at the president's tweets from over the weekend and today, if you look at the public statements of administration officials, what they're basically saying is, look, Democrats especially, if you got an issue with this, work with us or sign on to the bills that Republicans are ready to pass this week, and the president will sign them and this problem will go away.
Well, what are lawmakers saying about this policy?
Well, just before we spoke, Elaine, we got word from Texas Senator Ted Cruz, a Republican, who said that he himself is horrified by this and believes, quote, it has to stop. He's now introduced what's called the Protect Kids and Parents Act, which would, among other things, double the number of federal immigration judges from 375 to 750, authorize some new temporary shelters that would allow these families to stay together, and would provide for expedited processing and review of asylum cases so that within 2 weeks, somebody who legitimately makes an asylum case or applies for asylum at a port of entry would be processed. What's unclear is whether this would apply to people who just cross the border illegally and don't enter at a port of entry, like a border crossing of some kind. And but it is seen as a pretty swift response to this situation, which is playing out predominantly in Texas, but also in California and Arizona. Cruz is up for re-election this year. He has been a pretty conservative lawmaker when it comes to supporting current and stricter immigration policies, but I think he understands that in this case, this may be a bridge too far for the administration, so he's going to try to be out front here and try to come up with a solution. There is another proposal from Democrats. Dianne Feinstein of California, another border state, who's also up for re-election, has submitted a bill that would essentially block the administration from separating families, and that's about all it does. Only Democrats in the Senate have signed on to that as of now, no Republican co-sponsors. Whether either of these ideas gets a vote anytime soon is unclear, because the Senate, especially the Senate leaders, have been quite reluctant to hold any more talks or floor debate or votes on immigration policy in the midst of an election year.
Well, so help us understand, Ed, because there are 2 immigration bills scheduled for debate in the House this week. How are they going to address these issues?
Well, and these speak to immigration policy more broadly. This would provide the $25 billion for border wall and barrier construction that the Trump administration has asked for. They would address the fate of DACA recipients. And tucked in there now, in one of the 2 bills at least, is language that would bar the administration from separating families. bills. Here's the thing. Neither of those bills is guaranteed to pass the Republican-controlled House. Neither has Democratic support. And neither has earned assurances from the Senate or the White House that they would get their support as well, which would be critical to this. The president is scheduled to meet with House Republicans tomorrow afternoon to discuss this, and we'll see whether he perhaps endorses one of these two bills and urges Republicans to pass it. Some presidential endorsement, frankly, might move this thing along more quickly. But again, there's reluctance to take this up from Mitch McConnell in the Senate, and there's a reason to believe that there would be no Democratic support for this legislation because it puts stricter controls on legal migration, and it basically provides all that money that the president wants. There's some technicalities in how the two would do it, but basically the president would be able to walk away from either of these bills saying that he's gotten his money or at least congressional authority to start building the walls and the fences that he wants along the U.S.-Mexico border.
Well, earlier Monday, Senate Chaplain Reverend Barry Black touched on the subject. I want to play some of what he had to say.
Through the power of your Spirit, use our senators to cause justice to roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. As children are being separated from their parents, remind us to love our neighbors as ourselves and to protect the most vulnerable in our world.
Ed, how rare is it for a Senate or House chaplain to get involved in these kinds of debates?
Incredibly rare. Barry Black's been on the job for more than a decade. He often will sort of pray that members of the Senate find some divine intervention and find ways to work together. That's a general prayer of his that he gives on a regular basis, and one I think we could all probably sign on to, frankly. But he rarely engages in specific policy issues. I think there may be only one other time back in 2013 when there were some issues with the families of deceased service members getting their death benefits quickly, that he may have weighed in. It has been more common for the House chaplain, Father Conroy, to engage. He made some comments during the tax reform debate last fall that drew the ire of some Republicans and, frankly, almost cost him his job. People may remember that he had been removed and then got his job back. For Barry Black to do this is something completely different and a signal, I think, frankly, of how much concern there is among faith leaders in this country about what has transpired over the last several weeks along the border. Remember, this has been weeks in the making. This didn't just start over the weekend, but it has certainly picked up far broader public concern just in the last few days. And we've seen Catholic bishops and other Catholic leaders who run prominent Catholic publications weigh in on this. We've seen other evangelical leaders as well raise concerns. The White House today said if they've got concerns, they should be pressuring Congress, and perhaps they, at their houses of worship, should be housing some of these immigrants if they can offer services.
All right. Ed O'Keefe in Washington for us. Ed, thank you.